Hello everyone. Today I will be giving you a summary of chapters 7 and 9 in the book Chasing Lincoln's Killer. Chapter 7 Summary. The investigation and manhunt is still going on. Back at Ford's Theater, the investigation was well underway. Easter Sunday, 1865, is Black Easter. Abraham Lincoln had died. Cox invited Booth and Harold into his home. What happened for the next few hours remains a mystery. Cox and his son saw the murderer and his accomplice and decided to help them. Cox helped them decide on their next move. He told Booth that there was only one man, Thomas Jones, that could get them safely across the Potomac River. Once they crossed the Potomac River, they would be safe in Virginia. That is, if they could survive just one more day in Maryland. Thomas Jones would come to Booth and Harold in the morning and would signal them with a 3-note whistle as he approached. For now, it was too dangerous for Booth and Harold to remain at Cox's farm, so they would hide in a heavily wooded pine thicket some distance away. Booth and Harold slept there. Jones was a very intelligent and experienced man at doing stuff like crossing a river without being caught. The next day, Jones came and he proposed a plan to cross the Potomac River to Virginia. He said to leave it up to him when and how they would make the attempt. He said that Booth and Harold must not leave the pine thicket, make any noise, or do anything that might let anyone know they were there. He said that to cross the river, they needed a dark night, smooth water, and deserted riverbanks. It would be best to wait for the departure of many soldiers and detectives who had already followed Booth south into Maryland. That might take days, and there would be no doctor for Booth until they crossed the river. Then he left. Jones came back later with newspapers that Booth had asked for and really wanted. Then there were cavalry slabbers slapping the saddles of Union troops riding in their direction. The three men hugged the ground. Lucky for Booth, instead of turning into the thicket, they stayed on the road and went past the thicket, and rode into the sound of the hoofbeats vanished in the distance. They must wait. George Mudd, Dr. Mudd's son, made a vague report to Lieutenant Dana. Two suspicious strangers visited his cousin's farm seeking medical attention. Then, in an unbelievable stroke of luck for Booth and Harold, Dana ignored the news as old and unimportant. He thanked George Mudd and sent him on his way. He did not send troops to Mudd's farm to investigate. Distracted by other leads, many of them dead ends, Lieutenant Dana ignored the one tip that placed Lincoln's assassins within his reach. When soldiers had not come by his farm that evening, Dr. Mudd relaxed. Perhaps at this point they would not come at all. With the assassins' trail in Maryland growing cold, the soldiers would soon leave and shift the action to other places far from Bryantown and his farm. Thomas Jones had experienced enough excitement for one day. He agreed to return to the thicket to feed Booth and Harold the next morning, but he refused to bring horse feed again. It was difficult to carry enough feed for the horses, and Jones feared a passing cavalry patrol would hear their horses, which were hungry, restless, and noisy. The horses had served them well, and Harold loved animals, but they all agreed that the horses must be disposed of. The horses' reward for faithful service was death. Harold led them to a quicksand pit a mile away, shot them, and then sank their bodies. Harold returned to the thicket and sat on the ground beside Booth. Never during their escape were they more vulnerable and alone. If the Union cavalry found them now, they would not be able to make a run for it. Exhausted and injured, Booth could not hope to outrun a mountain pursuit. If Thomas Jones abandoned them, how would they find a way to cross the river? Later, in the safety of the night, Booth and Harold rolled out their woolen blankets and spent another night on the ground. Chapter 9 Summary. Booth was not expecting this when he planned the assassin and the escape for an extended campout under the stars. He and Harold couldn't bathe or wash clothes, and unshaven, they looked and smelled worse each day. Soldiers had visited farm several times and searched the house once. Jones came again with food and newspapers. Booth looked through the newspapers to find the article he had written on the day of the assassination. He had entrusted the letter to an actor friend who was to deliver it to the National Intelligencer for publication. But not one newspaper published or even mentioned his letter. The real reason, Booth thought something else for the reason, his friend, terrified of being connected to the assassin, never delivered the letter to the newspaper. He burned it. Booth opened his small date book to write about why he had killed Lincoln. On page 139. In newspapers, it mistakenly identified John Surratt as Seward's attacker. He was not even in Washington on the evening of the assassination. The cavalry officer decided to follow up on the info about strangers at Mudd's farm. They arrived at the farm and questioned Mrs. Mudd first, then Dr. Mudd. Dr. Mudd told them a story that was full of lies and half-truths. Mudd attempted to send the manhunters on a wild goose chase, claiming the strangers asked for directions to a farm to the west. They searched the buildings on the farm, then left. If Mudd thought he had cleared himself, he was wrong. The lieutenant had decided Mudd was guilty of something, and he would arrest him sooner or later. In the Washington, on the morning of April 19, there was Lincoln's funeral. Thousands of citizens would wait hours to view Lincoln's open casket. Lincoln's funeral procession was the most saddest, most profoundly moving spectacle ever staged in the history of the U.S. When the funeral was over, the president's body would be placed aboard a special train that would carry him home to Springfield. One of the guests reported George's Atzeroth's false statement that he killed Lincoln to a local Union informant. That sent some soldiers to the door at Hartman Richards' place to pick up Atzeroth. Richard said that he had been there but left, and then admitted that he was upstairs. Atzeroth surrendered without a fight, not even asking why he was being taken. Atzeroth confessed all. Now the War Department has its hands on two of the four men, Powell and Atzeroth, who are in the inner circle of the conspiracy. Following Atzeroth's arrest, Stanton issued a new proclamation. A reward was posted offering $100,000, an enormous sum for Lincoln's killer, $1.7 million in today's money. The poster included photos of Booth, Harold, John Surratt, the most wanted men in the country.